Hello, saints. Captain Mike here of the Voyagers, and I want to do a brief teaching on Luke chapter 19, starting in verse 41. It's the end of the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem, and we pick up reading this. And when he is come near, he beheld the city and wept over it, saying, If thou had known, even thou, at least in this day, the things which belonged unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. For the day shall come upon thee, that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee, and compass thee around, and keep thee in on every side, and shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee, and they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. And that's the name of this brief message. Do not miss the day of the Lord's visitation. I have two really quick stories to tell of you, one kind of negative and then one kind of positive. What we experience at our mall outreaches or even in the street, a lot of people that just reject us said, no, I'm fine. Even though they're Christians, even though we have a prophetic word or word of knowledge for them that could help them get to the next level, they still just walk away and ignore us. But then yet we have certain people that are hungry and thirst and are drawn by the Spirit, and we minister life to them. And so here I'm going to start with a little bit of a negative story. As I said, I was between a job, on my way to a job a couple days ago here in Temecula, and I decided to stop at a Starbucks. I kind of was in the mood for a little bit of a coffee thing, and I never go to this Starbucks. It's off a busy freeway exit here, so I pulled in, went into it, walked in there, huge line, a lot of people mingling about, but I'm always sensitive to the Spirit. Who do you have for me to minister to, God? And I was looking around, and I was in a line. All of a sudden, this young college-age woman came in, and she stood right next to me, and I knew that was my kind of divine appointment. I just know this with practice. And so that's interesting. I didn't get anything from the Lord. I had nothing. I didn't know nothing prophetic or anything. I got my coffee. She was right behind me. I went over, was mixing my little stuff in my coffee, and then she came over and stood right next to me. And then I felt like I still didn't have anything, but I felt I was supposed to just strike up a brief conversation. I did. I said, hi, my name's such and such. She said her name, I think, was Val or Valerie. Oh, how are you doing? Great. I'm just visiting from Connecticut. Okay, conversation ended. I went out the door. God said, no, hesitate, kind of wait for her. I said, this is awkward. So I went over to my car, a bunch of cars, random cars, stood there, and I thought, you know what? I bet you she's in the car right next to me. I don't know why. I just feel like it. Sure enough, she walks out, and she's a car right next to me, and I immediately, the Spirit of God started coming upon me. I said, young lady, I feel like I have a word for you from the Lord. And she was opening the car door, and she said, oh, I gotta go. I said, no, I got a word for you. And she said, no, that's okay. I said, are you a believer? Yes, I am a believer. And she said, well, I feel like God's got a word. And she said, no, I'm okay. And so I didn't push it anymore. I let her get in the car. Off she went. And I got in my car. And immediately God said, will people not pay attention to the day of their visitation? And so what was interesting for me in that moment is God had me go right to 1944 Luke and read that scripture I just read to you. Okay, so there's a lot of people sent. It doesn't matter if you're 13 or 80 years old. If God is going to send a divine appointment to a guy in California, this woman, in my brief conversation in the coffee shop, she had never been to California. She was just visiting for a few days, a friend. She's from Connecticut. She was heading to LA, and there I was. I was a plant. There's like 3 or 4 different times that I encountered and gave her an opportunity as a Christian to receive a word from the Lord, and she rejected it. Now, fast forward to our mall outreach here in Temecula this last Saturday, and a lot of people said no, a lot of people said yes, but here's a prime example of somebody who said yes. And so there's this young, late teenage gal that came by herself, walking by both me and Linda, and I said, hey, how are you doing? Would you like a word of encouragement? She looked at us, summed us up for a second, says, yeah, I think I do need to hear something. So she came over, very nice, sweet gal. Both Linda and I had prophetic words of knowledge for her. She was like 17, I think she was 16 actually, going to be a junior. She was struggling what she wanted to do with life, and God gave me some words of knowledge about specifically some things that she'd been dreaming and hoping for. She said, that's wild. God, I was wanting to do that. I was thinking that, and I felt, well, God's going to open a door for you to do that. And God just poured tons of blessings on her because she was obedient to heed the voice of the Lord. She did not miss the time of God's visitation. How, man? She actually jumped on board with it. So that was awesome. So there's the lesson for today, friends. Do not miss the day of God's visitation. And here's another practical scripture you can read in the book of John, the first 11 verses, and I believe it's verse 11, that Jesus came to his own, but his own received him not. They did not recognize the time of Christ. Christ coming. They didn't recognize him as the Messiah, even though the prophetic scripture had been speaking hundreds of years ago with many points where he would come from, who he would be, all those things. And even John the Baptist appeared on scene. But yet the hard-hearted man, so-called, quote, Christians of the day, rejected the time of Christ's visitation. You think anything is new under the sun, as Solomon says? The same thing is happening. I'm telling you, after 2 to 3 years of these different outreaches, people, even the Spirit-filled Christians, oh, I'm fine. I don't need anything more. I'm doing great. I just came out of church. Well, God's got something more. I just really positive. No, God's got something more. No, and they just keep walking by. Now, once in a while, some of these people will get convicted and they'll bounce back and come back and receive that prophetic, accurate word for us. So I say again, you saints out there, do not visit or do not miss the time of God's visitation in your life. Don't be shocked that it comes from a different source. It could come somebody older than you. It comes from somebody younger than you. It comes somebody that you don't even like how they look, but it could come to you. It could come to from a homeless person to you. That even happened to me and another gal in an outreach a couple months ago where we prophesied over a homeless person, and then she prophesied back to us some super accurate stuff nobody could have known unless the Spirit of God had revealed it to her. So don't miss the time of God's visitation. I feel impressed to tell you another story that happened to me over 25 years ago in another town in California, up in the Santa Barbara area. I was shopping in the grocery store. I'd been studying some things about eating healthy and some other things. And in this one aisle, I ran into this kind of, I don't know, blue collar redneck guy. I don't know how you want to call him, bearded, kind of wild guy. And he just started cursing and swearing, 4-letter words and everything. And I was like, man, that's wild. And he looking at me, he says, oh, you're looking at something to do for your health, right? And he says, with every blank word, he would say, hey, just eat blueberries and broccoli. If you eat blueberries and broccoli, you'll live like forever. You'll be really healthy. You'll be really healthy. And he just was going on and on. I didn't mean to say hell, by the way. But anyway, he was just going on and on. He was super like crazy, swearing. But I felt the second he told me that, now I was one of those who was smart enough. I recognized the time of God's visitation. There was a moment there, I recognized that. And in fact, I've held on to that word 25 years later. I do eat a lot of broccoli. I do eat blueberries. And, he was right, So do not, how do I say this? Do not be shocked. In this particular time and season on the earth right now, God does not send some unusual and peculiar people to give you a word to encourage you. There's going to time come, if you harden your heart to the prophets that are sent to you in the street, or even the grandmother that sits next to you in the church pew or something, and she's got a word for you. You don't heed that word. There's going to come a hardening in your heart where God won't send you any more people, and you're going to end up getting in deception and confusion, because I'm telling you, there is stuff going on the earth, both good and evil. They are competing for territory right now. Let me tell you, and evil knows its time is kind of come to an end prophetically, and it is fighting, and there are a lot of demons unloosed on people, on the Christians right now. Be careful you don't get into deception. Don't be careful you don't get into lies. Don't harden your heart to the day of God's visitation.